I'm Keith Klein. I'm a Senior Development Specialist on staff with the Office of Economic Development. I've been with the city for about 10 years. I'm originally from Chicago. I came here to go to the University of Dayton. I've been here ever since. And I primarily work with existing businesses and to help them grow, and also new businesses that might be interested in coming to Dayton.
Timothy Downs. I'm the Deputy Director of Economic Development. I have been in this position for 3 years now, a little over 3 years. I actually started with the city in 2004, so I'm working on about 8 years with the city coming up. And I'm an attorney. I started here in the city as an attorney, worked in that office, and got exposed to economic development through the work of the law department, and then had an opportunity to come up here and manage the office. So I manage the staff of 11, and I do economic development myself. I'm involved in a little bit of everything, whether it's retention and expansion visits or brownfield projects or whatever. I pretty much touch it all. So I'm born and raised in Ohio.
My name is Chris Lipson. I'm also a Senior Development Specialist with the Office of Economic Development. And I've been working for the city about 15 years. And I started out in the division of real estate, working with the reuse of tax delinquent properties, primarily residential properties. And then about 10 years ago started working with the Office of Economic Development on brownfield redevelopment. And I've been working diligently for many years on the Tech Town project. And I also work with the University of Dayton on the redevelopment of the former NCR properties. And that's pretty much my domain. Also working with Keith and some of the other staff on other sites, but those are the two that I'm focused on right now.
Okay. What is the total the total dollar number funding for the Economic Development Department? And what sources, where do they come from? How much come from tax dollars from citizens? How many come from businesses? How many come from federal government grants?
Well, first of all, we have several funds, several funding sources just within the city, and then obviously we work competitively sometimes, and sometimes through other means to obtain grants from the federal state government. But I'll talk specifically about the funding that we have directly through the city. We have our operating budget, which is general fund money, which is tax dollars. This year, that was just over $1 million, or excuse me, just over $1.1 million. And that covers all the salaries, the basic operating expenses, if we need a contract for an attorney, a contract for an environmental services company, to do a study, that kind of stuff. It doesn't pay for any grants to businesses, it doesn't pay for any matching dollars for brownfield projects. We have several other funds, most notably is the development fund. When you see a project come up before commission where there's some grant dollars or some financing dollars to help a business expand, grow jobs, stay here in Dayton, whatever, that's where it comes from. It's the development fund. That fund currently is funded annually, but the last 3 years those dollars have been going down by about $500,000 each year. So just 3 years ago we got about $5 million. Last year we got about $4 million. This year we're getting about $3 million. So I guess it's going down by $1 million. Of that allocation, we have a sub-allocation that's specifically used for downtown. In 2009, there was an initiative to say we're going to spend $5 million as matching funds for business retention and expansion, as well as other development projects in the downtown area. So, and that's $1 million a year for 5 years. We also have some other funding sources. We currently manage what we call a stipulation fund. It's money that came from DP&L through a rate case settlement that occurred a couple years ago. We ultimately, when it's all said and done, we'll have received $1.4 million. We're getting $350,000 a year for 4 years, and we're using that money to fund projects like our recent Cocos project, the recent Green Slate project, putting a green roof on Bond-Bright distributors. We've got another one coming fairly soon where we'll help pay for some energy efficiency measures in another project where they're renovating a facility to secure a renewal of a lease of a company that has about 120 jobs and stands to grow. So again, we have several funding sources. Currently the development fund is at about as far as available funds at about 1.5 million. We try to keep a reserve in place so that when projects come along, we can try to help those projects out. Now, Chris mentioned TechTown. Over the years, TechTown has received lots of grant funding through the state, different programs through the state actually, Clean Ohio and JRS, which is the Job Ready Sites program. But then we also put some matching dollars in, and the development fund helps with that as well. So again, quite a few funding sources, varying levels and varying uses.
And there's also, I was reading that like some N2PS, I'm not sure if I'm getting the acronym right, for the lots building.
Yeah, and
correct. I read about that.
it's called NSP, and this is round 2 specifically. That was talking about there's
That's
another
federal,
round coming.
those are federal dollars,
Correct,
right?
from HUD.
So,
And we don't manage those dollars. Those dollars are managed through the Department of Planning and Community Development.
okay.
Now, sometimes we're involved with projects where our services will be needed to overlap, and that project in particular is going to be both community development as well as economic development project when it's all said and done. But currently, we're not involved in the project itself.
Okay. What methodology is used to determine which businesses to support with money and which businesses not to support with money's development money? From whatever, whether they be DP&L dollars, whether they, from whatever sources. How
Well,
is that determined?
the driving factor for us to assist a company with dollars in particular is whether or not there's going to be jobs. Obviously, we want to focus on and help retain jobs that are already here, grow from within. However, we try to spend some energy and dollars on jobs coming from out of the area as well. That's how our economy grows, and that's another way our economy grows. So either way, retain jobs or new jobs is our driver. But we focus heavily on what the payback to the city is going to be, what our return on investment will be. In other words, if we put $50,000 into a project, how quickly are we going to get that $50,000 back, and what will we get after that through the life of the agreement through their income tax withholding that's paid to the city? That's the direct benefit to the city.
Do you have any projects that, obviously some of these, it's hard to measure a return on investment on something that's new, but say from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that you can look back and say, there's return on investment to the city through jobs, taxes, and all the other ancillary economic development or just activity that goes around the project.
We've got a few current projects that are in active agreement stage where our return has been quite a bit higher than we expected when we did the original calculation. And basically what we do is we take the number of jobs that are going to be created, the company will give us an anticipated average salary. We can calculate what the new payroll would be, and then based on that, calculate what the taxes to the city would be. So it's a pretty straightforward calculation.
Which projects are those?
Well, we have Southwest Ear, Nose, and Throat here in downtown Dayton, over on First Street. They're doing well as far as a physician's office. They haven't. They're still in the midst of creating. So what we do is we give them a creation period, basically. They'll tell us, we think we're going to create X number of jobs over a certain period of time. So that's their creation period. Actually, they're still in their creation period. Another one is Excellence in Motivation, which is right downtown here also. They're in their creation period, so they're not at their job peak where they expect to be at the end of that first 3 years, but they're already surpassing the payroll tax estimates that they provided when we set up the agreement. So those are just two off the top of my head, and I know those just because I've met with them recently.
Okay.
There's also generally an immediate benefit to the city's economy because normally our contribution is a small percentage of the project cost.
Right.
So we're leveraging a significant investment by the private sector. So we might only have 10% of the project be our grant. So the other 90% is all new spending in the community that is generating jobs and revenues.
And that's one of the measures that we use when we analyze a project. What will the private investment be? And what portion will ours be? Will it be 5%, 10%? We try to keep it as low as possible and leverage as many private dollars as possible.
So typically, to your question, how do we pick somebody? It's not only are they creating jobs, but what are they investing in their own company that's going to result in those jobs? So
Right.
are they buying some new equipment? Are they adding on in addition to their building? Are they, making renovations or some combination of the three that starts to create a package of investment in that company or that facility that the city wants to support?
Citywide. I don't need to go through a different list. Do you guys think that creates a labyrinth or complexities in the economic development process as a city and a region that may not be necessary?
It certainly creates complexities, if for no other reason, because we all have our own strategies. I mean, we all want to grow the economy, but we all have different ways of doing that. Now, there are certain partners out there that are labeled economic development organizations that we work directly with and we work hand in hand with. There's others where our work kind of overlaps. We've got a great relationship with the county. We've got a great relationship with the Downtown Dayton Partnership. All three of us do sort of different things. We have a great relationship with Citywide Development Corporation. Again, they do different things. They provide financing. We don't do literal financing through this office. Those entities, we're all part of a team. Then there's other organizations that sort of overlap what we do, but again, don't do the same sorts of things, like the Chamber of Commerce. For a long time, they've done economic development. They reach out to the businesses, meet with them, find out what's happening, see if there's ways that or resources that they need to grow the business, or at least stabilize the business. We do that, but they do it in a different manner. They're a member organization. Then the Dayton Development Coalition. They're probably our, as far as matching up what we do, they're probably our closest, and I'll just say competitor. They're not a real competitor, but as far as what we do and what they do sort of the same things. But now their footprint is much larger than ours. We focus solely on the city of Dayton, the corporate limits. They focus on a much larger region. That in and of itself sometimes creates a little stress for us, simply because we'd love for them to focus just on Dayton, but they can't.
Competition.
Right, and they serve members that sometimes are in direct competition for the same jobs. And that's the nature of the business. It happens everywhere across the country.
2020 plan, it talks about, we've been reading, it talks a lot about regionalism. It also talks about, what's being done to help businesses. They seem to have a real knowledge economy theme to it. But one of the biggest things I've heard lately is not everyone can beat Bill Gates, and I certainly understand that. What's being done to help businesses out that aren't in the knowledge economy, and because there's a whole segment of jobs out there that always need to be done, just based around human activity.
Yeah, part of what we do is goes beyond just grants and projects like TechTown. Part of it is a very basic level grassroots business assistant in terms of answering questions like, where do I go to get an occupancy permit? How do I, who can I talk to at Vectran to get my gas rate examined? Where do I, even get, how do I file to create a corporation? Where can I get small business training so I can write a business plan? So some of this are very basic grassroots. We'll talk to anybody, and we will help anybody that has those kinds of questions that we can help answer. And if it's not something that we do directly, we have a very strong network throughout the region of folks, whether it's SCORE or the county or whoever it is that can help answer those questions or address those service needs. So part of it is about connecting the dots, so to speak, with those entrepreneurs, no matter what they do, to the resources in the community that can answer those specific questions that they have.
That kind of brings me to the next question, and it's spurred by a news report I saw on CNN, and it was probably in the first 2 years of the Iraqi war, where the U.S. forces had taken over a town, and the first thing they did was establish a free marketplace in the town for people to bring goods, whether they be artistic goods, whether they were, food, the whole cornucopia of, products that come along with human life and civilization. Is the city of Dayton ever considered possibly putting together something where people with no money, but some skills and, a little bit of elbow grease, could create, almost like a market bazaar type thing, where they could create, small businesses for a very, and kind of grow up out of something like that.
Just as one example, if you look at the Garden Station project at 4th and Wayne, that the property that they're on is actually a city-owned property that we're leasing to them for, I think, like $10 a year. And so because of the city's willingness to work with them and make that asset available to them, they've been able to do some really exciting things in terms of art and sculpture and some free markets and garage sales and all those kinds of things. I would also look at resources that we have, like the Entrepreneur Center at Tech Town, where it's not free, but it's set up to be an incubator so that a company that's starting out has not only very cheap rent for that office space, but also a network of mentors and advisors that can help them figure out how to move that business forward.
One of the issues that we have is, we can't cover the entire spectrum of jobs and businesses out there. We've got to be able to focus in on some targeted areas, which is what we do. And the reason for that is we have to take the strengths that the community has. Obviously, one of the strengths that this community has is manufacturing. We've had that for as long as the city's been around. We still focus a lot on that. We have a lot of manufacturers that still reside in the Dayton area and are doing well. They're not the size of GM, they're not the size of Delphi, they're not the size of NCR, but they're still providing really good products for the world economy. We focus on them just as much. Just because they're not identified as part of the knowledge economy doesn't mean that we don't address them, and we really spend a lot of time with them. And that's actually one of the real strengths of our economy here, is that we still have that strong foundation of small to medium-sized businesses that would fit under that manufacturing umbrella. So, when it comes to things like what you mentioned, a bazaar or a market, that kind of stuff, it's hard for us to get involved in those sorts of things because really that's driven by the market itself. There's very little that we could do other than providing land or, giving a structure. Yeah. So, but we, again, like Keith said, we don't turn anything down necessarily as far as assistance. Now, when it comes to handing out a grant or some sort of financial aid, that's different. I mean, we have to have some parameters around that. But, we try to help as many as we can.
The other thing I would point to, in terms of the companies that we meet with, we're on target to meet with something like 200 and 300 companies this year, all just in Dayton, that folks like me and Chris go out and talk to and spend an hour talking to that CEO or that president of that small business. Most of them, I would say the grand majority, have between 15 and 30 employees, sometimes more, sometimes less, but the average company, I would say, is in that 20 to 30 range. So those are small businesses that we are out there talking to day after day and trying to find ways to help them.
Is there any way, without seriously changing U.S. trade policy, that manufacturing can rise to a level that it has before? I mean, a lot of these manufacturing issues just completely out of your hands at a macro,
because we're competing with China and India, and really
at a macro level. I mean, what happened to Dayton, Ohio, to happen all across the country?
I wouldn't say it's out of our hands as a society. I mean, it's out of our hands as economic developers, and we can guide people where we think we can connect them. Like Keith was saying, connect the dots. That's critical in business, to know what your resources are in your local area, so that rather than choosing to go to China for part of your supply chain, you might look right down the street and there might be something you just didn't know about. So we are involved in that piece, and we've had some successes in that recently. But again, we have to make a choice as a society, what we're going to support and what we're not going to support. And I was just at a business end of last week, where they make the parts here. The parts are sent to Mexico. They're put together in some other component, and that component's sent back to the United States for final assembly. So, it's all part of a system that's been set up for quite some time now.
One of the things is that important to recognize is that cars are still being made in the United States. They're just not being made in Dayton. But a lot of our supply chain manufacturers have adapted and are supplying parts to Honda or Ford, or they're entering into new markets. Maybe it's producing machines for the food industry or some other sector. The challenge, the bigger challenge, is that while manufacturing is still a really, really large sector of the American economy, the productivity in the United States is just tremendous. And it's never going to go back to thousands of workers on the assembly line, because we have robots, and we have manufacturing efficiencies that have been developed over time, so that now you're seeing some manufacturing coming back to this country from China because it can be done cheaper here when you factor in the travel time, and the quality is better because of the tolerances that can be manufactured here. So similar to the trajectory that farming went through, we're still producing, the vast majority of or vast quantities of food, but very few farmers are doing it. Manufacturing's headed in the same direction. So the question is, what will the jobs of the future be? And that's where you see the 2020 emphasis on advanced manufacturing and materials sciences and aerospace and information technology, because it's those future jobs that we need to try and capture here. So
Will
that
they
we
be
have
able
a
to
sustainable
employ the
economy.
heating masses then?
Well, the plan is to have, the mayor was was it this morning, was on CBS talking about our immigration plan. We'd much rather have 10 employers with 100 jobs as opposed to one employer with 1,000 jobs, because then all your eggs are not in one basket. If some tough time hits one sector, it doesn't wipe out all your jobs, just like the automotive manufacturing did here in Dayton.
Are there any disincentives being developed to keep people from moving to the suburbs and moving back to the city? For one example, correct me if I'm wrong, we ship water to Centerville. Am I correct? Kettering.
I don't know if they're a
For
customer or
residential
not.
person, well, we do at some of the suburbs.
To
And
the county.
We sell water to the county. The county ships it around. Not sure exactly where they sell to, but
but it's sold to and sold off. From what I understand, it's really not a price integrated for like local citizens to purchase. Are there any things that the city can do to disincentivize? Obviously, if the water's being shipped 20 miles from here, like anything else, there's more cost involved, so
Right.
it should cost more. What can the city do to disincentivize people from wanting to move out?
that's right at the heart of the regionalism conversation. Us as a city of Dayton, there's probably very little that we could do. But in cooperation with our surrounding jurisdictions and our county, we could probably have a great influence on that, but that's a matter of choice for politicians at this point and changing policy. We're in a long-term agreement, speaking of water, we're in a long-term agreement right now with the county, and that's a decision that was made, and it's not an easy decision to change or an easy relationship to alter. But I think a lot of people recognize now that we'd be better off as a purveyor of water to sell directly to anybody than to sell through basically the county being a middleman at this point.
One thing to think about is, besides things like giving grants to companies, we're also, investing in infrastructure. Like, if you look at downtown, all the streets have been paved downtown within the last 2 years. So that those kinds of things that we're doing that make the city more attractive in that sense. And it's not a disincentive, but it's ways that we can compete by making sure that the city is as attractive as it can be to those companies.
And we think that Dayton, as the core of the region, or as the heart of the Miami Valley, is still a quality, desirable place to live. And that's the emphasis that we need to pay attention, that we need to put forward. The other issue that you're talking about, of course, is sustainability. And as the community conversation and the national conversation pays attention to the issues of sustainability, the advantages of an urban environment will stand out over suburban.
Is the city helping any renewable energy businesses getting started at this time?
I personally have had several conversations with a business that's trying to stand up, or an individual I should say, trying to stand up his business that basically surrounds the idea of hydrogen stations.
Mhm.
And his technology is fantastic. He's in the process of working through that. He's currently located in Inglewood, and he's made statements that he'd like to open up manufacturing of his product here in Dayton. He's not there yet. He's not at that stage yet. But when he gets there, we'll talk. The alternative energy, advanced energy industry is not unlike all the others. Basically, you have the regions in the country that can support that type of development. Solar panels are made up in the Toledo area. It's very unlikely that solar panels will ever be made here, despite the fact that we have an abundance of water, and that's a critical component in that process. It's just a matter of where things get started, where the knowledge base is, where things have been established, and the support network underneath it. But we have a lot of opportunity in this area or in this region to develop water technologies, because we have every type of water you can think of other than oceans, but basically we have rivers and lakes and groundwater, surface water, all the different sources, and we can do a lot with water technology in this region. So that's one area that we're really starting to develop some strategy around.
A lot of the policies and incentives that are driving alternative energy development right now are being set at the state and federal level, and we don't have a lot of control over that.
Why are housing and development grouped together in government? How are resources allocated between them? How are these related in the city's mind?
Development as a term covers the gamut. It covers, housing, it covers business development, it also covers community development in the sense of creating infrastructure in an area or neighborhoods or whatever. Technically, here in the city of Dayton, business development is in this office. Housing and community development is up on the 6th floor. So we're not together. We work very closely together, but we're not together technically in the city of Dayton. But they are linked because, again, like downtown, we focus on downtown. We know that downtown has to be strong for the city to be strong. Well, one of the components of that is having people live downtown. If you just had people working downtown in any environment, in any city, it doesn't work. You've got to have people living here to support all the businesses after hours and grocery stores and shops and all that kind of stuff. So they are tied together.
Grammatically, the reason we do brownfield development and the reason the city's involved in housing development is because the city of Dayton's landlocked and we're completely built out. So the only way that new development can occur, whether it's housing or business, is by recycling the land,
Right.
going through a process of eliminating the obsolete product and developing new product, and that's what we try and do in housing. That's what we try and do with brownfield redevelopment.
And the whole kind of downtown wireless broadband strategy, or broadband in the city. The last time I tried to use Harbor Link, to be honest, I wasn't real pleased with it. I mean, the tech guys I talked to at Sinclair are like, oh, don't even bother with it. What is where's that all?
We had an arrangement with Harbor Link years ago where they established a pilot project within the city in the downtown core to establish a wireless network that would be open or available. And for whatever reason, they couldn't perform the rest of the contract. They had several years to build out the network, and they just didn't do it. I can't speak for them as to why. I know the gentlemen at Harbor Link who run the business, and they're doing well in other areas. So we just severed our formal relationship with them.
Okay.
Speaking of just broadband in general, though, I'm working intimately on a daily basis, much to my chagrin at this point, on trying to develop some plan to use the fiber that the city has, the fiber optic cable that the city has, to basically do economic development, to leverage the asset that we have, the infrastructure, to either create a wireless network downtown, to invite a third party to come in and manage it, to sell some of it off or lease some of it off just to get monetary gain for the city. There's a lot of options with that, but we're in the process right now of developing that, and my goal is to have an RFI out by the end of the year.
An RFI is a
Just a request for information. It's basically like, we have this, we want you to come and tell us what you could do with it,
okay.
as opposed to a specific project.
That trend to have kind of free Wi-Fi everywhere was tried in a lot of cities, and most of them failed. So